Business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117 by the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Part B, Amendment Number 3, printed in House Report Number 113-117, offered by Ms. Fox of North Carolina.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Virginia Fox, Republican of North Carolina, with an amendment to the Farm Bill which would cap the total price loss, the amount of the price loss coverage payments, and the revenue loss coverage payments during fiscal year 2014 through 2020. This is a 5-year bill after all, at $16.7 million.
On this vote, the yeas are 267, the nays are 156. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 5, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117 by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Brown, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Part B, Amendment Number 5, printed in House Report Number 113-117, offered by Mr. Brown of Georgia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a recorded vote, the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
The underlying bill is the Farm Bill, which sets farm, nutrition, and agriculture programs and policies for the next 5 years. They've been considering 103 amendments, or will consider a total of 103 amendments. A vote on 8 of them here, this one by Paul Brown of Georgia, an amendment which would repeal the Permanent Price Support Authority for milk.
On this vote, the yeas are 112 and the nays are 309. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 8, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117 by the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Part B, Amendment Number 8, printed in House Report Number 113-117, offered by Mr. Blumenauer of Oregon.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Democrat Earl Blumenauer's amendment would deal with the Conservation Reserve Program. 2-minute vote, one of the 103 considered on the Farm Bill. The Senate today has been mostly dealing with immigration again, amendments to the immigration bill, although now the Senate is voting on the nominee that President Obama's put forth on trade. He is Trade Representative Michael Froman, so the vote is underway in the Senate. That's over on C-SPAN 2. They have been talking about amendments to the immigration bill, in particular about border security. Early they rejected an amendment by Mike Lee of Utah, 38-59. That would have fast-tracked congressional approval of border security strategies before Homeland Security could process applications. Meanwhile, Politico is reporting this afternoon that the Senate's Gang of Eight is approaching a deal with a pair of Republicans to beef up the immigration bill's border security language. According to senators and aides, the report from Politico late this afternoon says the emerging deal would soften the strict 90% border apprehension trigger requested by some Republicans, provide for an unprecedented increase in boots on the ground, and add a guarantee on finishing the fence along the southern borders, according to sources that Politico is reporting on. That from Politico.com.
On this vote, the yeas are 179, the nays are 242. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 9, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117 by the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, on which the further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Part B, Amendment Number 9, printed in House Report Number 113-117, offered by Mr. Blumenauer of Oregon.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Another amendment vote by Earl Blumenauer. This one deals with conservation. It would reform the Environmental Quality Incentives Program to increase access for smaller farms and eliminate payments to projects that don't show strong conservation benefits. Another 2-minute vote. The Senate passed its version of the Farm Bill earlier this month, and they've been working on Immigration, they did just approve the president's nominee to be his trade representative, Michael Froman. It passed overwhelmingly by a vote of 93 to 4.
On this vote, the yeas are 157, the nays are 266. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 14, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117 by the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur, on which the further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Part B, amendment number 14, printed in House Report number 113-117, offered by Ms. Kaptur of Ohio.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
The House is in its first series of roll call votes on amendments to the Farm Bill. Under the rule, they will consider 103 amendments. This one's by Elsie Hastings of Florida and Marcy Kaptur of Ohio, which deals with the long-term viability of the honeybee. In the First Amendment vote, the House rejected a Democratic amendment that would have restored $20.5 billion to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, also known as food stamps.
this vote, the yeas are 273, the nays are 149. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 15, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117 by the gentleman from California, Mr. Royce, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Part B, amendment number 15, printed in House Report number 113-117, offered by Mr. Royce of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of this request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
A bipartisan amendment, Republican Ed Royce of California and Democrat Elliot Engel of New York, with an amendment that would reform U.S. international food aid to allow for not more than 45% of authorized funds to be used for cash assistance for purchasing food in local and regional markets closer to the recipient rather than for shipping U.S. agricultural commodities abroad.
On this vote, the yeas are 203, the nays are 220. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 16, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117 by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Shabbat, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Part B, amendment number 16, printed in House Report number 113-117, offered by Mr. Shabbat of Ohio.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Well, this is likely the last recorded vote of the day, but certainly not the last amendment. An amendment here by Steve Shabbat of Ohio, which strikes a portion of the bill, a portion reauthorizing the Market Access Program through fiscal year 2018. That's a program that helps U.S. producers, exporters, and private companies finance promotional activities for U.S. farm products. 2-minute vote, and again, the House will get back to debating more amendments to the Farm Bill in the next couple of minutes.
On this vote, the yeas are 98, the nays are 322. The amendment is not adopted.
Brooks is in place as you.
Committee will come to order. Members kindly take their conversations off the floor. Again, members will take their conversations off their floor or take their seats. For what purposes, gentlemen from Alabama, rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk to terminate the funding for the Emerging Markets Program.
Clerk will designate.
Part B, Amendment number 18, printed in House Report number 113-117, offered by Mr. Brooks of Alabama.
Gentlemen will suspend. Committee will be in order. Will members take their conversations off their floor or take their seats? To my right, members take their conversations off the floor. To my left in the hall, in the aisles as well, members will take their conversations off the floor. It is now in order to consider amendment number 18 printed in Part B, and we'll go on to the next step. Pursuant to Resolution 271, the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brooks, and the member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment that I propose would eliminate the funding for the Emerging Markets Program. For those of you who are not familiar, the Emerging Markets Program assists United States private and public organizations with agricultural marketing in low to middle income countries in Africa, the Caribbean, Central and South America, Eurasia, and the Middle East. The Emerging Markets Program funding is $10 million per year in this food stamp and farm bill. Over the 5-year life of this legislation, funding is $50 million. The Emerging Markets Program duplicates and overlaps the federal government's much larger marketing agricultural program. By way of example, in 2010, at least 27 of the 82 projects funded by the Emerging Markets Program went to entities that also received funding from the federal government's marketing agricultural program. Emerging Markets Program expenditures are quite informative. $30,000 was spent on, quote, Brazil craft beer school seminars for the Brewers Association, end quote. $468,000 in hard-earned taxpayers' money was spent studying food consumption in China's second-tier cities, the new frontier for U.S. agricultural export opportunities. $212,000 of taxpayers' hard-earned money was spent concerning, quote, hotel, restaurant, and institutional sector development for the United States Department of Agriculture, Foreign Services, Chengdu, China. $174,431 was spent on a, quote, Global Food Safety Forum, China Exchange for the GIC Group. $35,000 was spent on, quote, China Beer Distributors Education Program for the Brewers Association. $142,356 was spent on a, quote, Central American Microbiological Standards Program for USDA Foreign Agricultural Service, and the list goes on and on and on. Mr. Speaker, since first, the Emerging Markets Program overlaps and duplicates America's marketing agricultural program, and since second, the private sector's ability to do this work without federal government intervention or assistance, and since third, America's out-of-control deficit and debt situation slowly but surely increase America's risk of a debilitating insolvency and bankruptcy, and since finally, America's financial condition forces us to borrow every penny of the $50 million being spent on the Emerging Markets Program, I urge this body to be financially responsible by adopting my amendment to eliminate funding for the Emerging Markets Program. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Senator reserves. Who claims time in opposition? The gentleman from Oklahoma, for what purpose?
Mr. Chairman, I arise in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself as much time as I might consume. The Emerging Markets Program, P, provides funding for technical assistance to aid public and private agricultural organizations in their efforts to improve market opportunities in low and middle income nations that offer viable markets for our U.S. Commodities. This program truly focuses on promoting U.S. products to build repeat customers in markets where incomes are growing to the point that they can import high-quality products. Program resources may only be used to broadly support export of U.S. commodities and products, and promote a company's own branded product is strictly prohibited. The Emerging Markets Program requires the participating entities to commit a portion of their own resources to seek export opportunities in emerging markets, and to prioritize, and priority is given, I should say, to the applications which bring the greatest amount of cost share funds to the project. Mr. Chairman, there are a number of studies about the amount of dollars that this generates in U.S. agricultural exports. It's one of those things that help us move into markets that have the potential and the growing potential to buy our products. I believe it is a good use of resources, and it's subject, of course, to the oversight of the appropriators, and I would ask my colleagues to reject the amendment rather respectfully, and with that, I would yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma yields back. Gentleman from Alabama.
How much time do I have remaining?
You have 2 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me consume those 2 minutes. The gentleman from Oklahoma's response, and he's a good friend of mine, is reflective, unfortunately, of the financial irresponsibility that jeopardizes America's future solvency. Let's keep in mind that we're in a triage situation. We've had 4 consecutive trillion-dollar deficits. We are looking at blowing through the $17 trillion total accumulated debt mark. If we cannot eliminate a program of this magnitude, only $10 million per year, a program that is duplicative of other federal government programs, well, I would submit to this body that that suggests and reflects in a very strong way the financial irresponsibility that has put America into the position we are in, where we are at risk long-term of a debilitating financial insolvency and bankruptcy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Alabama. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the
Mr. Speaker, ask for a roll call vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Alabama will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 19, printed in Part B of the House Report 113-117. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Part B, Amendment Number 19, printed in House Report Number 113-117, offered by Ms. Castor of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 271, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Castor, and the member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise today to offer an amendment that addresses a problem relating to the American citrus industry and implementation of the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement. Mr. Chairman, the Congress approved the U.S.-South Korea Free Trade Agreement, and it was signed by the President in 2011. The agreement has increased opportunities for U.S. businesses, farmers, and workers through important access to a vital foreign market. Under the agreement, over 95% of bilateral trade in consumer and industrial products will become duty-free within 5 years of the date of the agreement. And for American agricultural products, the U.S.-Korea agreement immediately phases out tariffs and quotas on a broad range of products. The U.S. International Trade Commission estimates that annual U.S. ag exports to South Korea will increase by a minimum of $1.9 billion upon full implementation. In particular, the Free Trade Agreement eliminated South Korea's 54% tariff on frozen concentrated orange juice, and it phases out the tariffs on fresh grapefruit and freshly squeezed orange juice over 5 years. The negotiated removal of such tariffs will allow the American citrus industry to grow and expand. It will create jobs in America, including jobs related to citrus growers, maritime businesses, and ports such as my home port, the Port of Tampa. This is great news for my home state of Florida and other states across the U.S. where they grow citrus. It's vital to our economy and local communities. But we have hit a little bit of a stumbling block with South Korea during the implementation of the Free Trade Agreement. South Korea is resisting the USDA's country of origin certification for U.S. citrus. And my amendment, the Castor Amendment, seeks to correct this problem by directing the Secretary of Agriculture to ensure that the Department certificates of origin are accepted by any country with respect to which the United States has entered into a free trade agreement providing for preferential duty treatment. Fortunately, the Congressional Budget Office says there is no new cost for this amendment, and I'd like to thank my colleagues from Florida, Congressman Webster and Congressman Hastings on the Rules Committee for their support in getting this amendment made in order. I'd like to thank Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Peterson for their fair consideration. I urge a yes vote on the Castor Amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Would the gentlelady yield?
I yield.
I would just note to the gentlelady, I think by the expression on my ranking member's face, we both agree this is a good faith effort to try and make something happen. Therefore, we would accept the language. I yield back my time to you.
I thank the chairman of the Ag Committee and the ranking member, and thank them for including the Castor Amendment in the Farm Bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Does anyone claim time in opposition? If not, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed.
It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 20, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117. It is now in order to consider amendment number 21, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Part B, Amendment Number 21, printed in House Report Number 113-117, offered by Mr. Grimm of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 271, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Grimm, and amendment proposal will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Thank you, Chairman. I rise today to offer an amendment that would reduce fraud in the SNAP program. The Farm Bill currently requires the USDA to create pilot programs around the nation that leverage federal-state partnerships to combat SNAP retailer fraud. My amendment requires the USDA to include at least one of the top 10 largest urban areas as one of the pilot program locations. And to be clear, the bill specifically states that any state or large urban area chosen for a pilot program would not be able to divert resources away from recipient anti-fraud efforts. Thus, this program only supplements those recipient anti-fraud efforts. This is a critically important amendment because we must ensure that the pilot programs account for unique structure of SNAP programs within large urban areas. For instance, in one Midwest state, 75% of SNAP benefits were redeemed in just 8 large supermarkets or publicly owned convenience stores. But the urban environment is distinctly different. As an example, New York City has over 10,000 SNAP retailers, of which 80% are small, privately owned retailers. And according to recent statistics, while 87% of SNAP transactions occur in large supermarkets, they account for only 5.4% of retailer trafficking. Conversely, 9% of SNAP retailers are privately owned, small convenience stores in local neighborhoods, but they account for 80% of SNAP fraud. Therefore, to be successful in combating retailer fraud, we must ensure that we're able to investigate fraudulent activities at these small, privately owned stores. To do this, we must ensure that a large urban area is included at least one of these pilot programs in one location. If we fail to include a large urban area in the pilot program, we will miss a large portion of retailers responsible for 80% of the retailer fraud. This amendment will not take a pilot program away from any other state or determine which large urban area must receive a program. It only says that to ensure we receive fully accurate information from the pilots, that we must include at least one large urban area. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman yield?
The gentleman will yield.
I would note to my good friend and colleague that I think he is involved here in a good government measure, and I would encourage my colleagues to support the amendment, and I would yield back to the gentleman.
I thank the chairman of the Ag Committee, and I will yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time.
Just making sure no one else...
Members seek time in opposition. If not, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 22, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
To claim the time.
Does the gentleman have an amendment at the desk?
I do have an amendment at the desk.
Then we'll have the clerk designate that amendment.
Part B, Amendment Number 22, printed in House Report Number 113-117, offered by Mr. Hudson of North Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 271, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Hudson, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to support our common sense amendment to allow the states to conduct drug screening on applicants for welfare. If adopted, this amendment would join a list of good government reforms contained in the Farm Bill that save taxpayer money and ensure integrity and accountability within our nutrition system. From preventing lottery winners from receiving food stamps, to closing loopholes and preventing illegal immigrants from receiving benefits, I commend the chairman and ranking member on the work done to reform the food stamps program in the Farm Bill. Mr. Chairman, our amendment simply allows the states to conduct drug testing to ensure addicts and criminals are not taking food stamps, or taking food, rather, out of the mouths of hungry children. This debate is not about hungry children. We all agree that we need to take care of the least among us, those who need this type of assistance. We all agree that we don't want children to go hungry. What this amendment is about is making sure that addicts and criminals are not taking what is not theirs, taking food from the mouths of these children, taking food from those who are in need. And so I ask my colleagues to just consider this as a simple measure, a common sense measure, and at this point I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from North Carolina reserves his time. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Wisconsin rise?
Mr. Chairman, I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Well, I guess I would rebut several of the arguments the gentleman has made. First of all, you know, common sense really ain't that common. And this amendment is an example of that. First of all, it uses very fallacious arguments that, you know, presumes that most of the people who use food stamps also use drugs. I would just remind the body that 46% of the people who use food stamps are hungry children. And as the author of this amendment has suggested quite incorrectly, this is not about hungry children. It is. Because if that person in the household who is the applicant is denied food stamps, hungry children will be affected. This is it's unconstitutional. This has been through court. It violates the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution against illegal searches and seizures. It costs a lot of public money just to humiliate people. They found in Florida, for example, that people who don't use public assistance programs are 3 times more likely to be drug users. And nationwide, they have found that recipients don't use drugs at any greater rate than the general population. And this is a slippery slope in not in violating one of the basic tenets of our Constitution. Mandatory drug testing laws are not based on individualized suspicion, and the Supreme Court has held that it doesn't pass the constitutional measure. It'll cost $75 for one of these drug tests, and for what purpose? Just to criminalize and humiliate poor people. And so with that, I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves her time. The gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you. At this point, I will yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Yoho.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank my colleague from North Carolina. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with my colleagues, Congressman Hudson and LaMalfa, in offering this amendment. Under current law, states are not allowed to test SNAP recipients. This amendment would give states the authority to do the testing only if they want to. So it gives states rights. Law-abiding citizens who are most in need are those who the program is meant to serve. We're cutting waste to protect this program so we make sure that the SNAP dollars are going to those who truly need it, not to those who are able to spend funds on illegal purchases. With a $17 trillion national debt, we must give states all the tools they need in order to make sure SNAP funding goes to the people most in need. And I thank my colleagues, Congressman Hudson and Congressman LaMalfa, for working with me on this, and encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you. I balance my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentlelady from Wisconsin.
And Mr. Chairman, how much time do I have?
Gentlelady has 3 minutes remaining.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to remind the body and the sponsors of this bill that SNAP already has an option to target and punish drug offenders. States right now, without this amendment, can require individuals who have been convicted of a drug felony to submit to a drug test before they can receive SNAP benefits, totally in line with our Constitution. At this time, I would like to yield time to Mr. McGovern, a great member on the Ag Committee. 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentlelady. I rise along with her to oppose this amendment. I just want to say, really? This is what we're debating here right now? I'm curious why the amendment doesn't include drug testing for people who are benefits of crop insurance or who receive direct payments, agricultural benefits from the federal government. Why aren't we requiring that they be drug tested too? Why don't we drug test all the members of Congress here? Force everybody to go and urinate in a cup to see whether or not anybody's on drugs. Maybe that'll explain why some of these amendments are coming up or why some of the votes are turning out the way they are. Bottom line is, this is about demeaning poor people. And we've been doing this time and time again on this House floor. Enough is enough. We don't need this amendment. This is a bad idea. Please vote it down.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
How much time do I have left?
The gentleman from North Carolina has 2.5 minutes remaining.
At this point, I'd like to yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from California, Mr. LaMalfa.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to join my colleagues, Representatives Hudson and Yoho, to again offer a common-sense amendment that will further assist in diminishing the abuse in the SNAP program. This is a no-nonsense amendment. If you have enough money to buy drugs, you do not need taxpayer money to buy food. This amendment protects the taxpayer from directly subsidizing the purchase of drugs. Without this amendment, drug users will continue to use their money to buy drugs and your money to buy food. This amendment gives states the ability to implement a drug screening program in the way that works best for them, but it needs to be part of the SNAP benefit qualification application. There are already 29 states that have proposals to do this, and 8 states have already passed this type of legislation for this type of screening. Letting drug users abuse the SNAP program diverts funds from those who truly need it. That's what we're about here. Of course, this is what taxpayers, when you talk to regular folks, this is the kind of thing they complain about around the kitchen table, like, why are my tax dollars going towards this? Why don't we, if I had a dime for every time I've heard this, people want this sort of thing to happen for those that are abusing this program. Taxpayers deserve better. The folks that really need the benefits of food stamps deserve better. I ask for aye vote on this amendment.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentlelady from Wisconsin.
Sir, how much time do I have left?
The gentlelady has 1.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to yield time to the gentlelady from Connecticut, Mr. Laurel.
How much time?
1 minute and 15 seconds.
The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute and 15 seconds.